The story of Judah and Tamar. Have you ever thought about a woman who was widowed twice, deceived by her own father-in-law, and sentenced to be burned alive? Yet that very woman became the great-grandmother of the Savior of the world? Today, I will tell you the story of such a woman. What she did with her father-in-law will shock you, but when you understand why she did it, your entire perspective will change. And the most surprising thing is that the man who seems to be the greatest sinner in this story later becomes the main pillar of the lineage of Christ. But how? That is the mystery we will uncover in today's video. So stay with us until the end, because this story will show you how God can turn even the greatest human failures into part of His divine plan. And maybe, in this story, you will find an answer for your own life too. Let's begin. In the land of Canaan, where the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived, there was a man named Judah. He was one of the 12 sons of Jacob and was known among his brothers as a strong and influential man. Judah was respected for his wisdom and strength, but sometimes power and authority can also blind a person. The Bible in Genesis 38 verses 1 and 2 says, "At that time, Judah left his brothers and stayed with a man of Adullam named Hira. There Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. He married her and went into her." Judah's decision was not just a personal choice, it marked the beginning of his spiritual decline. God had instructed His chosen people to remain separate from other nations to preserve their faith and holiness. But Judah ignored this command and followed his own desires. God gave Judah 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Genesis 38 verses 3 to 5 says, "She conceived and gave birth to a son and named him She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. Then she gave birth to another son and named him Shelah." When grew up, Judah arranged for him to marry a beautiful young woman named Tamar. Tamar was special. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also wise and courageous. Her married life should have been full of love and joy, but fate had other plans. Judah's eldest son, was wicked in the eyes of the Lord. Genesis 38 verse 7 says, "But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord put him to death." The Bible does not tell us exactly what did, but his sin was so serious that God Himself took his life. This teaches us that God does not overlook sin. In an instant, Tamar became a widow. Her dreams and hopes were shattered. According to the customs of that time, it was the duty of a dead man's brother to marry his widow and produce offspring for him, a practice known as levirate marriage. Judah instructed his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar. Hope returned to her eyes. Maybe now her home would be restored. Maybe she would finally experience motherhood. But Onan thought differently. He knew that if Tamar bore a child, the child would be considered his brother's heir, not his own. Genesis 38 verse 9 to 10 says, "But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he went into his brother's wife, he spilled his seed on the ground to keep from giving offspring to his brother. What he did was evil in the sight of the Lord, and He put him to death also." Now Tamar was widowed a second time. Her pain must have been unbearable. Judah's third son Shelah was still young, so Judah said to Tamar, "Go back to your father's house and remain a widow until my son Shelah grows up." Genesis 38 verse 11 says, "Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, 'Live as a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up,' for he thought, 'He may die too, just like his brothers.' So Tamar went to live in her father's house. But Judah's promise was a lie. He was afraid Shelah might die too, and he began to think that Tamar herself brought bad luck. Time passed. Shelah grew up, but Judah did not fulfill his promise. Tamar realized she had been deceived. Her future was dark. Her honor was at stake. Tamar had suffered great injustice. Widowed twice, deceived once. In that society, a childless widow had no value or protection. But Tamar was not an ordinary woman. She had intelligence, courage, and above all, a longing for justice. Sometimes in life, when all legal and social paths are closed, A person must find her own way to justice. Tamar's story is one of such moments. She made a bold and mysterious plan, a risky step, but perhaps her only chance for redemption. Genesis 38 verse 12 says, "After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, accompanied by his friend Hira, the Adullamite." Matthew 1 verse 3 says, "Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron." How astonishing! God used a painful, scandalous situation to fulfill his divine plan. Tamar, once a despised widow, became part of the lineage of the Messiah. Romans 8:28 says, "We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." This assures us that even in the darkest moments, God's plan is ultimately for good. Tamar's story teaches us that when society denies us justice, we must not give up, but pursue truth with courage and wisdom. Isaiah 1 verse 17 says, "Learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow." Tamar did not accept injustice. She had courage to fight for her rights and wisdom to do it rightly, through evidence, not accusation.